a lot of you probably woke up, as I did, to news alerts that there had been a full airspace closure over the West Texas town of El Paso. And originally, this was announced to be a 10-day closure of airspace. Again, this doesn't really happen much at all in America. I don't think this had happened even since September 11th, when all airspace was closed temporarily. Now, they have already lifted it.
So the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, put a post on X that said the FAA and the Department of War acted swiftly to address a cartel drone incursion. The threat has been neutralized and there is no danger to commercial travel in the region. The restrictions have been lifted and normal flights are resuming. As we mentioned before, the cartels use drones to smuggle drugs across the border. They have IEDs that they can drop from drones. They can smuggle weapons. They even just use it for surveillance tactics of finding new places to mule people across the border for their coyotes. They also use it to track border patrol. And there's also many ways that the U.S. combats this, whether it be through technological ways. You can take down a drone by disabling it with a directed pulse that will, disable the technology, causing the drones to collapse to the ground, or whether it is
a discombobulator.
Not that discombobulator, but maybe.
Something
because
like it.
There's also this situation here where people are speculating, well, because this happens all the time, was there something else going on? We know that it is near Fort Bliss. And
checks a lot of boxes.
That we know that there's a lot of new technology that all of a sudden the United States has been trying out in places like Venezuela. Was there a concern that if they were testing out new technology on the drones that has not been previously tested in the radius of commercial airlines? Is that a situation? There's a lot we don't know and a lot of speculation, because in and of itself, a drone incursion across the border, especially unless they all of a sudden have the type of drones that are military drones, a larger Reaper-style drone that is almost an airplane size as compared to a more commercialized drone that can still be big, but traditionally where they're flying aren't cause for a complete ground stop, especially for 10 days. We know that this is over, but a lot more questions, especially for members of Congress that represent these areas. I think we will find out more about what's going on, but it doesn't seem that just the superficial story of it being the everyday type of drone. There is another reason why the FAA decided that a 10-day ground stop was necessary for a time, and then they were able to change and course correct.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they thought it was something stronger, bigger than maybe what it was. They were able to go in and investigate this situation and see what it was and realize it was at no threat or was at a minor threat. Maybe that's what was going on. However, that doesn't change the fact that the news it always seems to be changing. And again, as I've said here on this show, it feels like we can only focus on one story at a time. Right now, if you turn on the news, of course, the only thing being covered right now is the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping. And I'm not just saying it shouldn't be a top story. It is a horrific, and we are praying for that family, and we hope she gets home safely. There's been news on it. But again, I always feel like the American people can balance a few stories at once. So you can balance what was going on in Minnesota. You can balance what's going on in Iran. You can balance what's going on with Nancy Guthrie. And then also have situations like this where we can discuss the framing of immigration reform and going what that looks like. Because like I said, that I did feel like some of those moments with ICE in Minnesota did make you go, oh, I do think there's a difference. You can't paint it this broad with what immigration looks like and what border security looks like, and what going into a city and starting deporting people and what that chaos could bring to a city is not necessarily always the same of what's happening directly at the border. And a lot of people are at least on the side of there being some kind of border protection. And of course, hopefully, most of them on the side of there not being drug cartels being able to run, or human trafficking cartels just being able to run amok in our country. And we have seen some of these changes in the way crime is treated in America to provide some very significant decreases in numbers. And a lot of these were coming from CNN, Will. They were coming from what you would say are, if they're biased, they certainly are biased, but not towards something that would like to give any credit to a conservative administration.
Well, and here's what I think that we should remind people, and I think a little bit where those that are pro-border security and pro-immigration reform and controlling the amount of illegal immigration have lost the narrative a little bit, is because it has focused so much on ICE raids in places like Minnesota, so far detached in the American mindset from the southern border that it can...
Minnesota, probably one of the most detached.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. You start to lose maybe the narrative of where this all stems from. And I want to point people back because this was one of the most revealing publications or articles written about immigration in some time. And I always think about this when we're talking about this entire narrative. This is from the New York Times in 2022. So in the middle of the Biden administration. We always think of the cartels as being drug smuggling operations and weapon smuggling, all the illicit activities that are harmful to American citizens and things. But that is their focus, right? That's their moneymaker. You think of even the way it's in Hollywood and put on TV is that it is the drug kingpins, and that's how they make all their money. This article
from shady warehouse somewhere.
Right. This article from 2022 in the New York Times is titled "Smuggling Migrants at the Border Now a $1 billion Business." Because previously, while they still made a significant amount of money, but in 2018, during the first Trump administration, the cartels were only making about $500 million from smuggling of migrants. So not necessarily smuggling of people that are smuggling drugs. This is just the business
getting
of
people over the border.
Illegal immigration. They found in 2022, 2 years into the Biden administration and the disastrous border policy that they had, it had become a $13 billion business.
It's much less of a risk.
In 4 years, they took it from $500 million to $13 billion of revenue source for these drug cartels. These drug cartels that are narco-terrorist para-states that operate within Mexico, and they had taken that revenue astronomically more. That is what we're talking about when we talk about immigration and border security. Because not only are the illegal migrants here, many of them criminals, committing these horrible crimes here without a lot of retribution in many cases, but it also is a major revenue source for the drug cartels, which kill tens of thousands of Americans through overdoses of fentanyl, through overdoses of all these other drugs that they smuggle in.
Really, 100% of their business is that they're in the business of American deaths.
And when you see how much money they're able to make from a lower risk proposition, that helps fund the other operations. So just the illegal immigration component of it is a national security issue. Even when you take out all of the other political policy debates that people have around it, there is a reason why this administration focuses on it. And I think to some degree, they have lost that narrative because it does need to go back to who this is benefiting. And that is a national security issue.
Yeah, this is direct quotes from CNN. The most recent Major Cities Chief Association survey, which made up of statistics compiled from 67 of 68 responding law enforcement agencies, released again just a couple days ago, early February, shows that homicides were down 19% last year. First year of the Trump presidency, part 2. 19%. That's in homicides. Reports also showed that robbery was down almost 20%. Sexual assault was down 9%, and aggravated assault was down 10% last year compared to 2024. So that's what shows you how actual change in some of these laws and leaderships actually can affect the safety on the streets. You may get scared because you're looking at the news. You're seeing chaos in Minnesota. You're seeing the situation with Nancy Guthrie. Again, our prayers and our thoughts are with that whole family, and we hope that it ends up being a safe return. But let's not forget there is actually some very interesting data. The statistics show that this data shows we're actually headed in the right direction.